Madagascar's former president, Didier Ratsiraka, dies at age 84. And thousands of Turkish women protest to the country's withdrawal from the domestic violence treaty. Hello and welcome to teleSUR English. I'm Jose Daniel Lopez in Quito, Ecuador, and this is from the south. Chile has entered a strict and extensive coronavirus lockdown as the country hits a new daily infections record. More than 80% of the country's 19 million inhabitants, including all residents of capital Santiago, have been put under a strict lockdown that prevents them leaving the house, even to buy groceries or pharmacy supplies. Only 169 intensive care beds remain available nationwide, which is an occupancy rate of more than 95%. Nearly half of the country's population has received at least one vaccine dose. However, on Friday, Chile recorded 7,626 new cases over a 24-hour period, which is the highest total at any point during the pandemic.
Police are continuing with sanitary controls throughout the country. The record of the last 24 hours is of 1,300 detainees who did not abide by the sanitary norms.
A Bolivian court has rejected an appeal by former President Yanine Añez and upheld a ruling that she must remain in preventive detention. A judge last week ordered that Añez be detained for 6 months after a hearing in which the allegations against her were outlined, including that she used security force allies to push Morales to resign after contested elections and eventually install herself as interim president. Añez and her energy and justice ministers face charges of terrorism, sedition, and conspiracy over the 2019 coup against former President Evo Morales. At least one person has died and another got injured after 5 tank trucks transporting fuel caught fire in Peru. The trucks were traveling on Peru's central highway on Saturday when rocks falling from the hills hit one of them, which spilled fuel on fire that engulfed the others in the convoy and cars in the area. Firefighters and first responders worked in the area after closing the road near kilometer 85 in San Mateo district. Argentina has suspended all flights from Chile, Brazil, and Mexico to curb the spread of COVID-19. The measure comes after Argentina reported almost 13,000 COVID-19 new infections on Friday, the highest single-day increase of new cases since mid-January. According to the Health Ministry, over 55% of intensive care units are occupied as well. Travelers returning from abroad will also be tested for COVID-19 before boarding a flight upon arrival, and 7 days later, local media reported. A similar measure was already in place for flights from the United Kingdom after a new variant was detected there in December.
I was in Sao Paulo, so the entire health system and hospitals were quite collapsed, with a lot of demand, so seemed appropriate to prevent the same thing from happening here, or what is happening with the new strains and everything that is happening there in Brazil.
It's fine that they do it for tourists, it's fine. But if it is for war reasons, they have to let people in and out for war reasons. Because if that's not allowed, I will be just another unemployed person.
Paraguay has imposed new tougher restrictions in an effort to curb growing coronavirus infections. Between 5 a.m. and 8 p.m. locals are only allowed to go out for essential activities as the pandemic continues to put the South American country's health system under severe strain. Those outside their homes during curfew hours are subject to questioning and arrest. The new restrictions will remain in place until April 4th, but can be extended depending on the situation. In the midst of economic strangulation measures by the United States and the impossibility of negotiating the purchase of vaccines from transnational pharmaceutical companies, Cuba has developed its own vaccines against COVID-19.
This is the prelude to the mass immunization of the Cuban population against COVID-19, to begin next June with the country's own vaccines.
I'm a little nervous, but calm, proud to be able to receive the vaccine after so long.
The final phase of clinical trials of Abdallah and Soberana 02, the 2 most advanced vaccine candidates of the 5 developed by Cuba, is currently underway with more than 90,000 volunteers. At the same time, an intervention study on 150,000 frontline workers is evaluating the effects of Soberana 02 on populations at risk.
Health workers in a general sense, to test firstly the effectiveness of the vaccine and secondly to decrease the infection rate.
The island is testing its scientific and technological sovereignty in a range of areas, with immunizers using the same recombinant protein technique used by the US biotechnology company Novavax. Cuba is thus projected to be the first country in Latin America and the Caribbean to produce its own vaccine against COVID-19. But if it succeeds, it will make these advances available to other countries in the region.
Beyond the fact that we can benefit financially, which is not what motivates us, it is our pride to have candidates for vaccination. It ratifies who we are and how we are. The fact that our product will be on the international market competing with so many other companies of such high renown is a reason for us to be proud.
As part of these trials and preliminary studies, Cuba's authorities expect more than 2 million people to be immunized before June, including all the inhabitants of the capital, in the month of May.
I am afraid of it, because it is not the same for me to administer it to a patient as it is for them to give it to me. But well, as long as it is for my own good and for the good of society, I am here for that.
Once the emergency use of these drugs has been authorized, the intervention studies for the whole country will continue, according to Sector. In August, it is expected that more than half of the Cuban population of 11.2 million will have been vaccinated, and all the island's inhabitants by the end of 2021.
In the Brazilian city of Rio de Janeiro, local NGOs are playing a key role in the fighting the coronavirus pandemic and providing support to residents of the poor neighborhoods neglected by authorities. Local NGO Redes da Mare implemented a system of home visits to keep infected residents of cities' poor neighborhoods safe, providing them with medical care, food baskets, and cleaning kits. Deliveries are made to a dozen addresses a day in Mare, a cluster of 16 favelas with 145,000 inhabitants, while efforts are also undertaken to raise awareness among residents to adopt measures to protect themselves from the virus.
We are delivering supplies and meals to residents who visit the tent, COVID-19 tested sites, and test positive. So we give them this meal to prevent them from going out into the street, and we accompany them for 14 days, the period during which they remain sick. They receive these kits, which help them to clean their homes. They come with alcohol, bleach, and soap, and the meals are because sometimes they are very weak and can't cook. So we provide them with food, and it helps them a lot.
More stories coming up, don't go away. Welcome back. Madagascar's former president Didier Ratsiraka has died at the age of 84. Ratsiraka, a former naval officer and one of the promoters of socialist revolution on the Indian Ocean island, was in power from 1975 until 1991 and returned from another stint from 1997 to 2002. He was well known for having close ties to the late North Korean ruler Kim Il-sung and Cuban leader Fidel Castro. After a contested election, demonstrations and armed clashes broke out from December 2001 to July 2002 between the supporters of Ratsiraka and those of his new opponent, Marc Ravalomanana. Ravalomanana was later declared the winner, and Ratsiraka was forced to exile in France for 9 years. At least 5 people have been killed and dozens injured after a 9-story building collapsed in Egypt's capital, Cairo. It was not immediately clear what was the cause of the building's collapse, and although government officials say they're investigating the issue, rescue workers were still searching for any survivors trapped under the rubble. The government has recently launched a crackdown on illegal building across the country, jailing violators and, in many cases, destroying the buildings.
When the diggers arrived at the site, they expanded the area and pushed people away and started working, searching for survivors. While I was there, they removed 4 bodies. They could see others, but they couldn't bring them out.
Meanwhile, a giant container ship remains stuck sideways in Egypt's Suez Canal for a 6-day Saturday, as authorities prepare to make new attempts to free the vessel and reopen a crucial east-west waterway for global shipping. According to local authorities, a maritime traffic jam grew to around 280 vessels Saturday outside Suez Canal. This means that about $10 billion worth of goods are now blocked. Sudan has received a shipment of Sinopharm COVID-19 vaccines donated by the Chinese government. China has been helping Sudan and other African countries in their fight against COVID-19 since the beginning of the pandemic. China donated batches of medical supplies to Sudan last year, and a Chinese team of medical experts was sent to the country in last June on a 2-week mission to support its fight against the pandemic.
This month marks the 50th anniversary of China-Sudan Medical Cooperation Protocol. I am glad the vaccines arrived on this occasion. It once again shows the deep friendship between the Chinese and Sudanese people. Whenever Sudan is at its hardest time, China always stands with us, and it has provided us assistance in all areas, including in healthcare. China plays an important role in the global fight against the pandemic.
Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed announced on Friday that Eritrean troops will be withdrawn from the country's Tigray region. After months of denials and reports of human rights abuses, the Prime Minister acknowledged that troops from Eritrea were involved in the fighting in northern Tigray, where the government launched a military operation against separatist forces last November. The Ethiopian PM claimed that Eritrea was concerned it will be attacked by forces loyal to the Tigray People's Liberation Front. A French commission of historians have presented a report concluding that France bears overwhelming responsibilities for the 1994 genocide in Rwanda. President Emmanuel Macron ordered the creation of the commission in May 2019 to analyze France's role in the Rwanda genocide from 1990 to 1994 through archival research. The report confirmed long-standing claims that France, then ruled by late President François Mitterrand, did not do enough to halt the massacres that left at least 800,000 people dead, mainly among the Tutsi ethnic minority, but claimed that there was not evidence of complicity in the massacres. However, the Commission concluded that France was involved with a regime that encouraged racist massacres and remained blind to the preparation of a genocide. The Syrian government has stressed that it will spare no effort to restore normal life in areas recently liberated from terrorist groups. The efforts prioritize the restoration of infrastructure and public services. Our correspondent, Hisan Wanous, has the story.
Normal life gradually returns to the towns of the eastern Ghouta region, east of Damascus, an area that since its total liberation from terrorist gangs in April 2018 is experiencing a continuous voluntary return of its inhabitants, who were forcibly displaced by extremists and who, together with the authorities, continue to work to repair the damage caused by the terrorist occupation.
With the support of the government and state institutions, citizens were able to return and recover their lives. And after 7 years of terrorist occupation, the people who returned to their localities and homes with much enthusiasm and determination to rebuild, work, and sow your lands, full of faith in a better future.
The area had suffered much damage due to terrorist attacks. But thanks to the joint work of citizens, social actors, municipalities, and different ministries, we have managed to recover the course of life, even though much remains to be done.
3 years after the liberation of Ghouta, two centers of the public communications institution in Mila and Hitate al-Terkman were opened after its rehabilitation. One of the many achievements in the field of public services that Damascus is striving to reestablish, despite the European and American economic blockade, in order to guarantee a dignified life for those who come back home.
This was achieved thanks to the sacrifice of our brave soldiers and citizens, and we are currently continuing the work to rehabilitate all the damaged establishments, an issue that would improve the lives of the citizens and the economy of Syria. We work to ensure a dignified return of the refugees and displaced persons. We have restored electricity and drinking water, and we are currently working on the rehabilitation of communication centers, and this center is one of several that were reopened, and we are confident that the future is better.
In the same framework, with official and civil society efforts, dozens of schools that were damaged have been rebuilt, destroyed, or used as centers of operation of terrorist gangs. In addition, thousands of workshops and factories, with few resources, were reopened. A joint effort covering the services, education, and industry sectors, among others, showing that the terrorists and their sponsors failed to fulfill their plans to stop life in Syria.
teleSUR, Ghouta Oriental, Syria.
We're taking one last break, but we have more news in a minute, so stay with us.
Una travesía para descubrirnos. Buscamos conexiones perdidas.
No nos queda otra que luchar, porque no tenemos nada que perder.
Realmente es por todos.
Recorremos el mundo con reportajes teleSUR.
Saturdays. Only on teleSUR.
Welcome back. Thousands have protested in Turkey calling on the president to reserve his decision to withdraw from the world's first binding treaty to stop violence against women. Protesters have taken to the streets of Istanbul for the second straight weekend to protest against President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's decision to withdraw from the 2011 Istanbul Convention. The treaty, signed by 45 countries and the European Union, requires government to adopt legislation prosecuting domestic violence and similar abuse, as well as martial rape and female genitalia mutilation. The protests came in the face of fresh anger in Turkey after a 17-year-old pregnant girl was stabbed to death. The suspect was reported to be the man she was living with. Myanmar security forces reportedly killed 93 people on Saturday in the deadliest day since last month's military coup. Soldiers and police in Myanmar used lethal force to suppress the latest protesters against last month's coup, with scores of people reported killed across the country. The death toll in Myanmar has been rising as authorities grow more forceful with their suppression of opposition to the February 1st coup that ousted elected government of Aung San Suu Kyi. According to the Assistant Association of Political Prisoners, at least 328 people have been killed in the post-coup crackdown so far.
Net justice, that is a brutalities, that is a massacre. Why UN stay waiting for anything? We call it that. How many dead bodies UN need to take action on those shooters? Right now, we hoping the international society do not silence, but speak out is not enough for us. We need real assistance. Today, you can see that military is doing that brutality of the killing. How many times, how many people are needed to show that is a massacre and that is a human atrocity. So that's why we want an international society just only saying condemning, just saying subtly, just saying about releasing the statement is not enough. We need a dual respectful supportive to us.
In India, voting is underway in Assam and West Bengal in state elections that will show how support for Prime Minister Narendra Modi is holding up amid the pandemic. The elections in the two eastern states on Saturday are the first since the farmers launched protests that have been mainly in the north around the capital, New Delhi. It was the first phase of voting in both states, and the results will not be known for months. Modi's Hindu Nationalist Party currently controls a dozen of India's 28 states, with alliance partners in several others, but it has never won power in West Bengal. Neighboring Assam, home to 32 million people, is polarized along ethnic and religious lines, with immigration from neighboring Bangladesh one of the biggest campaign issues. In Bangladesh, at least 5 people have died and many others got injured during a protest against the visit of Indian Prime Minister Modi. Hundreds of people demonstrated outside a major mosque in Bangladesh capital Dhaka as Narendra Modi wrapped up a 2-day trip to the country with a visit to a Hindu temple outside the city. Clashes which began Friday at the main mosque in Dhaka spread to several key districts in the Muslim-majority nation of 168 million, leaving 5 people dead, among many injured. On Saturday, thousands turned out to protest against the police and Modi's visit for Independence Day celebrations. Many accused Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party of fueling religious polarization in India and discrimination against minorities, especially Muslims.
Narendra Modi is a bloodsucker. Where he goes, blood sheds. In Gujarat, in Kushma. Now in Dhaka, we don't want this terror in our country. Immediately leave Bangladesh and save your honor, or else we will beat you out of this country.
Iran and China have struck a 25-year strategic cooperation deal. The deal was signed by Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi and his Iranian counterpart Mohammad Javad Zarif in the Iranian capital Tehran. Negotiations for the deal launched 5 years ago, but virtually no details of its contents have been released. But the two governments have agreed then to establish a roadmap for reciprocal investments in the fields of transport, ports, energy, industry, and services. China is Iran's leading trade partner and was one of the biggest buyers of Iranian oil before the U.S. President Donald Trump reimposed sweeping unilateral sanctions in 2018. After abandoning a multilateral nuclear agreement with Iran. About 1,000 people have rallied in Portland, Oregon to protest against the upsurge of violence against Asian Americans in the United States. The crowd gathered at Harrison Park for an event featuring speakers and performances, as well as an array of tents where people offer resources, information, Asian food, and pizza. The event came the week after a series of shootings at 3 Atlanta area spas, where out of 8 people killed, 6 were Asian American women. Stop AAPI Hate, an organization that tracks and reports violent crimes against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, tallied nearly 3,800 incidents from March 19, 2020 to the end of last month nationwide.
My whole life I've experienced this microaggressions and subtle racism because I grew up in Oregon and it's all white. So I felt like I never had a voice, and I would see this my entire life, so it's not new. This is something I've always experienced and seen, but today was a moment for us to speak our truth and just come and share really what we've been seeing our whole lives.
Portugal has begun vaccinating teachers and other schools professionals with the AstraZeneca vaccine as the country undergoes a reopening plan. On Saturday, nursery workers and primary school teachers were in the priority group, but officials hope to offer jabs to all teaching staff before the reopening of the secondary of schools on April 19. Portugal resumed administering AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccines last Monday, a week after temporarily halting its use due to reports of blood clots. It comes after the European Union's Drug Regulatory Agency concluded after a review it couldn't rule out a direct link in those cases, but say the benefits of using the vaccine overweights the possible risks. Over 1.3 million people in Portugal have had a first COVID-19 vaccination.
I feel safe in that, and this is an important step to overtake this problem of the pandemic and to work in a safer way.
And we come to the end of this news brief. You can find this and many other stories in our website at telesurenglish.net. And don't forget to join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.
Pakistani journalist Tariq Ali analyzes the international media influence driven by the empire, access and analysis of political, economic and social life throughout Latin America through our stream and website in English. A critical space committed to truth to determine the conjuncture that moved the world today. The world today. Mondays on teleSUR.
Una travesía para descubrirnos. Buscamos conexiones perdidas.
No nos queda otra que luchar, porque no tenemos nada que perder.
Realmente es por todos.
Recorremos el mundo con Reportajes teleSUR.
Saturdays. Only on teleSUR.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Sean todos muy bienvenidos a Vidas. Hay lugares donde el arte se unifica con el orgullo de los pueblos. Y esos lugares están llenos de colores, alegría, pasión, tradiciones, arraigo, valor y entrega.
Real Life. Fridays. Only on teleSUR.
为了保持身体健康，我冥想。
Para mantenerme saludable, yo corro.
To keep myself healthy, I study.
Για να διατηρηθώ υγιής, τρέφομαι σωστά.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo bailo.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo purifico mi espíritu a través del cuerpo. ¿Y tú?
Get your body. Tuesdays, only on teleSUR.
It is our duty to reverse the damage we cause to the planet. Let's recover our natural ecosystems with actions in defense of the environment. Let's keep fighting for a greener world. Wednesdays, only on teleSUR.
Follow the most important global events through a comprehensive perspective. With a team of journalists in 25 locations around the world to convey our people's reality. From the South. Weekdays. Only on teleSUR.
En un mundo en constante movimiento, todos los días se generan nuevos sucesos y es necesario conocerlos. Nos preguntamos, ¿qué hay detrás de cada acontecimiento? ¿Cuáles son las consecuencias y cómo nos afectan? Ante estas preguntas, buscaremos poner el punto en la I.
Dot in the I. Saturday, only on teleSUR.
Historically black colleges and universities, once the cornerstone institutions educating and attracting the best and the brightest of the African American community. But how will their role change as the United States moves towards becoming a majority-minority population? And are they still relevant in today's society? That's today's discussion on The Global African. I'm Bill Fletcher, your host. Thanks for joining us. Black colleges and universities were officially established after the American Civil War, a time where racial discrimination ran rampant, not only in the education system, but in everyday life. Blacks were largely summarily denied admittance into colleges where their Euro-American peers went on to American white-collar glory. Established before the Higher Education Act of 1965 was passed, HBCUs, as they were known, also known as Part B institutions, were defined as, quote, institutions established prior to 1964 whose principal mission was and is the education of black Americans, unquote. But there were more than that to black folks. They were safe havens, the sites of sit-ins and revolutions, great debates, and history-making. They were the breeding ground for cultural change makers like Martin Luther King Jr., W.E.B. Du Bois, Ralph Ellison, Langston Hughes, and Hal Jackson, just to name a few. Today's HBCUs are largely underfunded, face low enrollment, dwindling endowments, and low matriculation. Although the 104 HBCUs in existence today continue to turn out educated